over some of the opening strategies for Deathmatch, and just trying to give you guys an idea of how to um, know like what buildings you need to make in the beginning of Deathmatch. Uh, so yeah, that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with. They get a civ and then they don't know exactly what to do. So um, so first off, uh, in Deathmatch you start with 20k food, 20k wood, 20k food, 10k gold, and 5k stone. Usually, what I would recommend, just like in any game, is that you want to make the best possible units early on, like as many of your best possible units as you can. It doesn't really make sense to conserve resources in most cases. Like I really can't think of a situation in which you'd want to really conserve a lot of gold here. I mean, sometimes it can be good, it can be beneficial to spam a lot of trash units in the beginning and cause them to waste all their gold units to your trash. But higher level players won't usually fall for that type of trick. So it's best just to make the strongest gold composition army you can. And it's also okay to mix in some trash units, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So anyways, because we start with so many resources in the beginning, we don't need to go on economy right away. The first thing we want to do is make as many military buildings as possible, or as uh, as feasible, and I'll talk about that later. But so yeah, as you can see, we still have 5 population, so we still have to start out with making houses. But then uh, the other villagers we need to have build military buildings. So the question is which military buildings are we going to make? And again, that's going to depend on your civilization and what the enemy civilizations are. So in this case, we're Teutons, and what I like to do in terms of determining how many buildings to make is I like to the first unit or first decision you really have to make in the game is whether or not you're going to rush or not, or whether or not you're going to rush the opponent or not going to rush the opponent. And rushing the opponent usually involves making knights, cavalry, some sort of cavalry, right? And so I like to first look and see how good is my cavalry. Usually, if you get paladin, you want to make paladin. So um, in this case, Teutons get paladin, and so um, I typically will go for more stables than um, just like an average rush. Because honestly, you can rush with every single civ here. Um, the meso civs get eagles to rush with, and all the non-meso civs get cavalier with the exception of Saracens. They all get cavalier, and you can always make stables with any civ. Obviously, some civs have better cavalry than others, and that's something to take into account. But yeah, you can always rush with every civ. And in fact, I think it'd be good to practice rushing with every civ in the beginning because most of the lower level players aren't going to punish you for it, and it'll just help you get a little bit faster, and that's good when you're playing deathmatch. So anyways, back to deciding how many stables to make. So yeah, in a standard rush, I would consider opening something like this. I'd open with 2 stables, and then I'd have 1 villager build a house, obviously queue villagers up, right? And so now you have 2 stables going up and some villagers building houses. So with like a civ like Koreans that doesn't get good cavalry, you might just want to stick with 2 stables. Because the thing is that once we've made the cavalier to rush with a civ like Koreans, right, we're probably not going to make more cavalier later on because they're just not a very useful. They're just not a very gold efficient unit for our civilization, right? It'd be much better for Koreans to go into something like war wagons or onagers, right? It just doesn't make sense because their cavalry is just so weak, right? However, like I said, with a civ like Teutons, we do get paladins. So with Teutons, you can definitely make the case that we should add more stables. Again, Teutons also have some other pretty good gold units like Siege Onager and even Teutonic Knight can be viable in Deathmatch. So you may want to save your gold for those units instead. But in a lot of cases where you do get Paladin, it's usually good to open with quite a lot of Paladins. So um, one thing to kind of keep in mind is that each stable we're going to basically queue to the max when we're going to actually when we're actually going to go for that unit. So again, with Koreans, if we start with Cavalier, we'll probably only make around 5 Cavalier for each stable, just because we don't want to invest too heavily in the gold the into the Cavalier. It's just with a Koreans start, we would just be we just want to make a couple Cavalier to kind of harass them early, but then we want to switch into our other units. But with Teutons, what if we want to go Paladins like just as like one of our main units? Then it makes much more sense to max out the queue on the stables. So we'll make 15 Paladins for each stable, and 15 Paladins. I think the cost it's basically like somewhere around um, 1,000. It's a little over 1,000 gold. And so for me, it's kind of a nice rule of thumb. I basically think that for every stable, 15 units, 15 paladins, or even 15 elephants is going to cost 1,000 gold. All right. So, and that's just something I keep in mind because I'm trying to use up all my gold in the beginning. And so if I make four, so um, I try to keep in mind like how much, based on like how many buildings I'm making, how much gold am I going to be spending when I queue out the buildings. So hopefully that makes sense. So again, just to kind of put things in perspective too, you don't usually want to go for a ton of paladins, even if you get them. If you're against a civ that has like strong, or if it gets like a halberdier, because the thing is you could make 10 stable paladin, but what if the enemy just goes for 10 10 bears halbs or something like that? It's obviously the likelihood that you're going to be able to win with that many paladin is kind of unlikely because of how many helps they make. And then also you're going to use up all your gold, which will put you in a bad situation later on. So usually what I see most like higher level players doing is they'll go for 4 stables if they're going to go for paladin. There are some exceptions to that. For example, Franks makes paladin faster, and it's it's a stronger unit for Franks. So usually Franks will go for like 6 stable paladin, but for most other paladin civs, you'll go for 4 stables. Again, there's exceptions in the opposite direction as well. Celts, the paladin aren't as strong for Celts because they're missing the last armor upgrade. So maybe with Celts you just stick to 2 stables, just like I said, like Koreans or something like that. So, okay, so just to kind of go a little bit longer into the game here, um, I usually like to make houses kind of in a nice area, um, a nice small space like this, so that I'm relatively space efficient. The other thing you want to try to do is keep the buildings 1 tile away from each other, and this is something that it might be hard early on when you're just starting deathmatch, but something I did in order to get better at this was I just played against the AI and just practiced like constantly trying to build up. Like you don't even have to worry about rushing in the beginning. Just practice getting your buildings in really good spots like this, because this is going to be really good in terms of defending against a rush itself. Because if your buildings are far from your town center, then when the enemy comes in with raids, they're going to be able to snipe the villagers, and that's going to drastically slow down your production or your ability to get buildings up, right? But if you have them nice and tight like this, then it makes it more difficult for the enemy to snipe villagers. The other nice thing about having the 1 tile away is that if you have a villager building, like say like here or something like that, and you see that like one of their cavalier, paladins, or even hussar are targeting you, you can just build palisade walls around the villager quite quickly, right, and prevent the villager from being killed. Whereas if you have multiple like space between, if you have like a bigger space between the buildings, then you have to build like houses or something like that, which is a lot more like it's just a lot more like a lot less convenient and often doesn't work as well. So also if you don't build anything at all and you have like 2 tile distance, then it's very easy for the paladin to path to your villager. Where if there's just this 1 tile gap, then what happens is sometimes your units get created and it creates this that your own units will block the paladins from getting there and it'll kill the paladins before the paladin gets to your villager. Um, Anyways, so I think maybe I'll stop the video here. I just wanted to talk about, I still want to talk about the start, but I was told that I shouldn't make super long videos. But anyways, hopefully you guys have a little bit better understanding of maybe how many stables to build in the beginning. Again, if you're going to go for a standard rush and you don't have a good paladin civ, right, or you don't have a good cav civ, right, just having 2 stables in the beginning is fine. Just make a couple, maybe like six cavaliers or so, and send them out to rush, right? That's perfect. That's perfectly fine. But if you do get if you have a civ that does get paladin, going for something like 4 stables is usually the standard for it. Again, there are some exceptions, like 6 stable for Franks, or you might even go like 5, 6 stable if you're like Malay and you're going for elephants. But for the most part, 4 stable is pretty standard. Up next, I'm going to talk about some of the other buildings. So I'll be talking about the number of barracks you're going to make and the number of ranges you're going to make. and so forth. So anyways, I'll try to keep these videos short. So see you in the next video. Peace.